Isa pong mapagpala at ligtas from COVID sa ating pong lahat. It's very nice to see you all, mga kasamahan pong guro ng Calabarzon, mga punong guro, mga supervisors po sa pagtitipon po ngayong araw na ito. Naramdaman ko po yung kaba when I started presenting my paper way back 2014 po sa Calabarzon, Basic of Education Researchers. So ngayon po ay pahintulutan niyo po ako sa mga naririto po ngayon sa Zoom at sa FB Live na bigyan ako ng pagkakataon para tayo ay makapagpalitan ng mga insights at karanasan na may kinalaman po sa iba't ibang pedagogical practice na ginagawa natin at ililink po natin iyon sa mga research papers na kinoconduct po natin. So ako po ulit ay si Mark Aaron Reyes po, teacher researcher po ng Juliano Brosas Elementary School sa division po ng General Trias City. Bago po tayo magsimula, let's have a mental health check po muna tayo. So meron po ako ditong 1 to 11 po na statements. Makiki-type lang po in the chat box or dito po sa ating FB kung ano po dyan yung mental health status nyo ngayong araw pong ito. Kayo po ba'y kinakabahan? Are you feeling blessed? Stress po ba tayo ngayong araw na to? Exhausted, frustrated? So kindly chat po sa ating chat box or even po sa ating pong FB Live sa comment po. What is your mental health status right now? So mahalaga pong malaman natin kung anong mental health status natin ngayon, even with our teachers and even with our learners, so that we can be able to give appropriate interventions po sa ating mga kasamahang guro at sa ating mga mag-aaral sa ating mga paaralan. According to Ignacio Estrada po, if a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way they learn. Gone were the days po na si teacher po lagi lang ang masusunod sa paaralan at siya lamang ang nagbibigay lagi ng information sa kanyang mga mag-aaral. Ngayon po with the RA 10533 or the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, ang isang features po ng curriculum, it should be learner-centered. So dapat po tayong mga guro sa ating mga paaralan, we should exhaust all means on giving different options po para po matuto ang ating mga mag-aaral. Dapat po tayong mga guro, tayong mga paaralan, ang mag-a-adjust po kung ano po ang kailangan ng ating mga mag-aaral. At paano natin malalaman po iyon? We need to have data. Our programs, our interventions, our strategies in teaching should be backed up by data, should be backed up by research. Para po we are really addressing kung ano po yung specific needs ng ating mga mag-aaral. We are really addressing kung ano ba yung mga kailangan ng ating mga guro. Because if we are just implementing programs, we are making interventions, but you have noticed that the basis of your interventions and programs were not backed up by research, were not backed up by data. Ang nangyayari po yun, hilaw lang po yung ating implementation. Hindi po na-solve yung mismong root problem ng ating mga bata. Hindi po na-address talaga yung really the specific needs ng ating mga paaralan. Kasi our programs, our interventions were not backed up by data. Kaya po, if we want our students to learn, if we want our students really to get the learning competencies that they need to have for that specific grade, make sure po we should teach them kung paano po sila matututo. We should make an appropriate strategies and methods po kung paano po sila mag-aaral, kung paano po sila matututo. Ngayon po, with the pedagogical practice that we have, because of the 360 degrees shift of the educational landscape in the Philippines, talagang nagbago yung pedagogical practice natin ngayon. We change our teaching and learning activities that will really support in the delivery of the content ng ating mga mag-aaral. Because of the situation, we need to think out of the box. Ano ba ang kailangan ng bata ko ngayon? Bilang isang guro, paano ko maibibigay ang pagkatuto ng mga bata sa pamamaraang modular at sa pamamaraang virtual? So we need to think of different pedagogical practices. Kailangan meron akong appropriate methods and strategies on how I will give instruction in modular on how I will give instruction in online. Or maybe some of the schools are implementing the radio-based instruction and the TV-based instruction. So these are the pedagogical practice that we are doing in the school to come up with the effective and efficient delivery of the teaching and learning process. Ngayon po, bakit ba tayo gumagawa ng research? Gumagawa tayo ng research because we want to improve educational practices. We want to improve the pedagogical practices that we are implementing in our respective school. We do research because there is a problem that we want to assess. That is the power of research. So if I have this pedagogical practice that I am implementing in the school, that I want to know if this really solved a certain problem of my students, I need to make a research. I need to evaluate the implementation of that intervention. I need to evaluate the utilization of a learning material, of the learning activities. I need to evaluate the implementation of the different programs, projects, and activities that we are implementing the school because we want to improve educational practices. Pangalawa naman po, we do research because not only we solve a certain problem, but we want to share best practices. Sabi nga ni R.D. Panchat kanina, with the future is really uncertain, but it really opens a lot of possibilities. We need to create possibilities. We need to create different measures on how we improve educational practices by employing different effective and efficient practices that we are applying in our school. Because in that sense, we are really addressing the needs of the learners. Yun naman lagi ang goal kung bakit nagre-research ang isang guro, kung bakit nagre-research ang isang punong guro, or even a division personnel and regional personnel. Because we want to address the needs of our learners. That's the core of doing research in DepEd, because of our learners. Now, in making a research po, we should be guided with the guidelines. And I know everyone is familiar with the guidelines that we have, like the research management guidelines, the basic education research agenda. And in the basic education research agenda, we have different themes, but syempre, we should not be surprised why there are many research papers being presented today in the VCBER wherein it's under teaching and learning. Why? Because most of the researchers and most of the population that we have in DepEd are actually teachers. And being a teacher, I do research because I want to help my learners. I do research because I want to help my school. That is why I do research under teaching and learning. It's really dominant sa mga researches na ginagawa. Why? Because sabi nga natin kanina, the core of doing research is for our learners. But there are other things that we have in the basic education research agenda that maybe we can consider. And the other one is, I have here the inclusive education. Why? Because with the current situation now, due to pandemic, I know there are many schools in Calabarzon are having difficulties on how we will going to address the needs of our learners with difficulties and with learning disability. Just like, for example, in our school in JC Bespo, we have 7 learners who have difficulty and learning disability. So maybe this is one area that our researchers, our teachers can actually look into. Maybe if you have learners with difficulties kasi wala pa siyang assessment ng doctor, or with learning disability, baka po pwedeng yun yung maging area ng ating research na gagawin sa ating paaralan. And of course, because of the current situation, the DepEd Department of Education issued the BELCP. Ito ay salitang alam ng mga bawat guro ng Calabarzon and ng DepEd. And I just focus po dito sa areas ng BLCP. Why? Because along the way with our discussion, we will going to tackle some of the areas like the curriculum adjustment, the learning materials, the learning modalities, the training that we have for personnel, and of course, yung isa sa mahalagang ngayong partnership that we have are the parents as learning facilitators. Now we focus on the learning modalities. This is one area of a pedagogical practice that we changed really. From a face-to-face learning, we had these learning modalities like the online learning, modular learning, the RBI, and TB-based learning. Now, in the online distance learning modality, if you were going to notice, there are many researches backed by online distance learning, just like from Kabansag et al. 2020, wherein the research found that students really were motivated in the conduct of their online class. And it was observed the class participation and the good management of time. Another research from Maloloyon et al. 2021, teachers daw ay adaptive and receptive to change. Yun naman talaga tayo. We are really very adaptive to changes. Kaya nga noong nagbago ang pamamaraan ng pagtuturo, biglang nag-paradigm shift din ang mga guro natin. Nagkaroon ng pagbabago on how they handle things. Nagkaroon ng pagbabago kung paano sila magtuturo sa mga bata. Kung ako ay dating alam ko lang ay face-to-face, alam ko lang ay Facebook, alam ko lang ay Messenger, now I should know how to use the Google Classroom as the LMS. Now I should know how to use the Google Meet, the Zoom, for me to talk to my students. So really, teachers are really adaptive and receptive to change. And we teachers are really called the facilitators now of learning. And most of the teachers now opted for the online teaching. What area po sa online distance learning modality bilang isang guro ng paaralan ay pwede nating makuhanan ng datos o pwedeng area na magawa natin ng research topic. From Martinez et al. 2021, we had this assessment on the implementation of online distance learning modality towards the adjustment of learning delivery. This is a school-based research in our school wherein we focus po on the challenges and opportunities encountered by the pupils in online class. Ang aming pong paaralan ay isa po sa nag-pilot ng online class po last school year sa ating division, and we come up with different adjustments ng learning delivery. It is because just like the basic education learning continuity plan, if there are many researchers who use that as a research topic, at the end of the research, you will going to have an adjustment. Because there is really no perfect plan. Lahat ng plan may adjustment na pwede natin gawin. And the adjustment that we are doing with our BALCP or the adjustment that we are doing with the mechanism that we have in the learning modalities should be backed up by data. And one good thing is yung research na po natin. So if you have, for example, a research about your BLCP, and you evaluate really the implementation of the plan that you have in the BLCP, and you come up with the enhancement or the adjustment, that's a one research already po, mga kasamahang guro sa Calabarzon. And in our case po, we adjust po the learning delivery, the scheduling of subjects ng ating pong mga bata in online class. If you will going to observe po, sa amin po, ang online class po na synchronous happens every morning because of the data that we gathered na pagdating po ng hapon, nawawala na po ng konti ang mga internet connection. The groupings of the subjects based on difficulty as stated by our learners, and the adjustment of the weekly home learning plan, the contextualized weekly home learning plan that we have for the online class. So ito po yung ginawa namin. Based on the research that we conducted, we adjust po the online learning mechanism of the school. And one area that we can actually have here is the technical readiness of learners and parents. So if you conducted, for example, an orientation or a training for your learners and for your parents on the use of the LMS, so that's one data po. That's one research data that we can actually have in our school so that we come up with some adjustments on the problems they encountered. So this is how we really link research in our pedagogical practice. We have these modalities that we are applying. We want to evaluate the implementation of these modalities so that really we can adjust to the needs of our learners. Our learners this year may obviously are different from the learners that we had last school year. And the needs they encountered last school year may be different from the needs they have today. That is why we really need to have this assessment, this research undertaking for us really to adjust our mechanism and to give really the appropriate intervention to our learners. Next modality po that we are actually, most of the schools are implementing is the modular distance learning modality. Based from Astero et al. 2020, most public and private school heads perceived modular distance learning as really helpful and beneficial to teachers and students. So, makikita natin na maraming pag-aaral ngayon and even the researches that we have now in Visiber talks about the learning modality of modular. Ang pinaka-tanong noon is, you have this research result. What's next? Yun kasi yung pinaka-importante. After conducting this research, after finding the results of your research, what's next? And that question is given to all the researchers, to all the school heads of the Department of Education in Calabarzon, to all the supervisors, because this research result is really vital for us to give appropriate technical assistance to every school, for us to give appropriate intervention to our students. That we should not stop of finding this research result, the problems, the factors on the implementation of modular learning. We should not stop that because we should continue finding the appropriate intervention or appropriate program based from the data that you gathered from your research. Now, I have here a sample of a research undertaking that maybe others may take into consideration. We titled this one as a Bahay Aralan because we all know that in modular, a house, a home is a school. A lived experiences of a pupil as an input for continuous improvement of home learning. So maaaring yung mga karanasan ng mga bawat bata sa kanilang mga bahay habang sila'y nag-aaral ay malaking datos na kailangan natin para ma-continuously improve natin yung mechanism natin ng modular learning, ng home learning. So we need to take into consideration what is really happening at home. What kind of learning is happening at home? Ano ang importansya ng pagkakaroon ng learning space sa mga bawat bahay? Kung tayo sa ating mga bahay, meron tayong office space. Halimbawa, ikaw ay supervisor or principal, you have here a small space in your bahay, you call it an office space. Ano kaya yung importansya na magkaroon ng isang learning space ang mga bawat bata? And then, ano ang mga challenges na na-encountered ng mga bata, even the parents in modular class? Kaya nga malaking magandang datos yung binigay ng LESF, if you can still remember po, during the enrollment. Because it talks about not only about sa learners, but also sa parents. Why? Because if we found out that our parents, most of the parents really are working, and they cannot really attend to the education of their child, what appropriate mechanism we can actually do as an intervention for those pupils whose parents are really working. Yung both parents are working. And ano ba yung mga coping mechanisms na ginagawa sa modular learning? Even bata, even magulang, encountered problems. I know they come up with some coping mechanisms. They had these coping mechanisms that the problems they encountered at home while learning, they tried to exhaust all means on coming up with solutions. So ano yung mga ginawa ng mga bata natin? Ano yung mga ginawa ng mga magulang natin? Kasi that's very vital information para sa ating pagpaplano sa ating mga paaralan. And that is one area that we can actually take into consideration as a research topic. Now, for the TV and radio-based instruction, meron akong napanood na isang talk na sinasabi ay, pag sa radio-based instruction, paano yung participation ng mga parents and ng mga learners? Paano yung extent ng learning? How are we going to measure the extent of learning if a student is watching the lesson on TV? If a student is hearing the lesson during using radio, paano yung extent ng learning? Maybe that's one area that we can have a research. How are you going to measure the extent of learning ng mga bata sa panonood nila ng mga lessons sa TV, sa pakikinig nila ng mga lessons sa radio? And of course, yung preparedness ng teachers in delivering instruction, for example, in radio-based instruction. For example, in TV. And we all know sa TV broadcasters natin are really consuming much effort and time para makapagpalabas ng isang magandang palabas na kapupulutan talaga ng pagkatuto ng mga bata. And the accessibility. The accessibility of TV on some areas. The accessibility of radio-based instruction. Meron pong pilot na gagawin sa Jet3 po, specifically po sa Cluster 4 namin, kasi merong barangay na merong paging system, na baka maaaring magamit ang paging system sa pagde-deliver ng mga audio lessons, where yung radio-based instruction nagagamit ng radyo. Baka maaari, tingnan natin yung mga posibilidad. Then let's try to make paper on that. Let's try to make an assessment on that. And syempre, yung stakeholders engagement. Ang pinakamalaking kailangan ng isang stakeholder, ng local government unit, is actually a data backed by research. Now, if you will going to give a research output to your local government, telling that these are the needs of our learners in our locality, maybe they can consider that as a vital information for budgeting and planning. Baka makapag-isip sila kung paano ma-engage ang mga stakeholders sa programa na gusto nating i-propose since we have the data that can back our programs. One of the paper conducted by Hernandez and Medrano sa ISPO, sa Luis Wayfarer East National High School, is actually their contextualized teaching on air. The strengthening modular students' performance level through a school-based enrichment program teaching on air. So they identified a certain location in General Trias in San Francisco na ipapilot po nila yung teaching on air po nila. Yung mga lessons po, mga video lessons na ginawa po ng mga teachers po ng Glass Gens. Now for the learning resources, we're done with the learning modalities, the online, the modular, and the practices that we are doing. So after this talk, maybe you will ask yourself, ano nga ba yung ina-apply namin ng mga modalities sa aming mga paaralan? Ano nga ba yung mga ginagawa naming mga mekanismo sa aming mga paaralan? Ano kaya yung area doon na pwede kong tingnan at pag-aralan para makatulong ako sa aking paaralan para sa pagpa-craft ng appropriate intervention? So, hopefully after this talk, you will going to have this, ano yung take-away ninyo na maaaring madadala ninyo after attending the VCBER on how am I going to help my school, my learners with the pedagogical practices, the learning modalities that we are implementing in school and backed up by research undertaking. Now, for the learning resources, we are using the self-learning modules and the learner's activity sheets or the learning activity sheets. So from Emoting Book Jan 2011, it says that really in the self-learning modules, the contents, the activities, the exercises, and even techniques used in the modules were varied. Kasi, syempre, katulad ng binabanggit natin sa mga kasamahang guro natin, in crafting learning activity sheets, you need to give options to the learners with the situation they have at home and make sure these activities can be done kahit nasa loob ng kanilang mga bahay. Yung mga materials, especially in teaching science, yung mga materials na gagamitin sa kanilang activity, kindly give options to them kung ano yung mga materials na may be available sa mga bahay nila na pwede nilang gamitin. Kung halimbawa ay kailangan ng prutas na apple, wala namang apple doon sa bahay. Ano kaya yung kailangan nila na prutas na pwede pa rin magamit? Na talagang ang common tao ay meron at pwede nilang gamitin iyon para sa activity na yon. And sabi dito, the appropriate to the level and the needs of the students. Lagi naman pong ganon. Let's try to check the self-learning modules that we have. Let's try to check the learning activity sheets that we have. Are they really appropriate to the level and needs of the students? How are we going to do that? Let's do research on that. Let's evaluate that. So sabi ni Tan and Coral 2017, teachers evaluated the depth and produced grade 7 biology modules satisfactory. So I know sa bawat division natin ay merong mga tools in assessing the learning materials. They have these standardized tools in assessing the learning materials. We can actually use that material for us to evaluate our contextualized activity sheets, our contextualized learning activities, our contextualized project-based learning tasks, so that we can really say that, this is appropriate to my students. This is appropriate to the needs of my students. Based on the result, it is very satisfactory because really the contents, the activities, the exercises stated on the learning materials are really very satisfactory. So sana po gamitin natin yon. We have the materials, we have the tools on that. And we can actually have that as our research undertaking. So for the video and audio lessons po, from Miller 2019, really, there is an advantage of integrating video enhanced lessons po. So katulad ng mga modular students namin, yung aming mga recorded na lessons po na kinonduct ng teacher sa online po, yun po ay sinashare po namin sa aming mga modular students. Because hindi naman lahat ng modular talaga ay walang cellphone. Some have cell phones. And they can actually download the video if they have the mobile data. And I instructed our teachers po sa paaralan na if you have a video lessons and nasa GC, kung wala talagang internet yung mga magulang, once they go to the school, they can actually download the videos at school because we installed a Wi-Fi area in the whole school. So kaya po pagpunta nila na school, they can actually download the materials as they need using their cell phones. And we have the e-Tulay and Depec TV. Ito yung one area na pwede nating take into consideration in doing research. The extent of learning. How are we going to measure the learning that we have if the students are into e-Tulay, if the students are into Depec TV? We have this a research title, example, about the development and validation of self-learning modules towards the improvement of learning outcomes. So the areas that we can focus on that is really the assessment on the development and validation. And Is this really a contributing factor for learners' development? Sa paggagawa natin ng research, lagi nating at the end of the research, we can say, this is effective. Effective, because we want to get the effectiveness of a certain learning material, effectiveness of an intervention to the learner's development. But you should always remember that is one of the factors only. There are many factors on the development or the improvement of learning outcomes. Maybe we can say that's one contributing factor. That if we want to evaluate that again to another set of learners for another school year, second year, and then we have that for a third year, fourth year, and fifth year, maybe we can have the impact assessment. Really, this material, this intervention is really very effective sa pagkatuto ng mga bata. Why? Because in the comparison of the different results of your evaluation for the 5 years, it says that it is really effective. So yun po yan. Kaya iwasan natin yung pagsasalita ng impact. Isang taon pa lang naman natin nagamit. We cannot measure the impact of a certain intervention for just a year. It must be a series of evaluation for you to see really the impact of that material or that intervention. For the learning management system as a way of learning delivery. Swerte ang DepEd kasi yung ating Gmail is actually hindi siya hindi siya basic. Wherein pwede tayong gumamit ng Google Classroom. At the same time, in other divisions po, they are using the Moodle. If I'm not mistaken, Dasmariñas City Division is using Moodle as their LMS. In our division po, sa aming pong paaralan, we use Google Classroom as our LMS. Dahil ongoing pa po yung paghahanap namin ng third-party LMS provider po. That will be funded by the SEF po ng General City. So sabi dito ni Demans et al. 2020, the use of the learning management system is really to compare students' experiences and behaviors. Now, the area that we can actually take into consideration in doing research is the usability of LMS to pupils. Kung halimbawa gumamit tayo ng Moodle as LMS, let's try to evaluate it. Based on the perspective of a pupil, syempre on a perspective of a parents, dahil parents are facilitators in the online learning at home, and on the perspective of the teachers using the LMS. That is one area that we can actually link research on that. The usability of the LMS to pupils, to parents, and to teachers. And of course, the readiness of teachers, learners, and parents in the use of LMS. It's very hard really to introduce a certain tool to our learners, parents, and even teachers. Kahit po kami noong nagsimula kami ng online class as early as May, during May, parang katatapos lang ng ECQ, we had a training for teachers po sa paggamit ng Google Classroom. So kahit ako na nagturo sa aking mga kasamahang guro, talagang pinag-aralan ko kung paano gagamitin ang Google Classroom. Even when we use first the Google Classroom as a tool in our training po during ECQ sa mga module writers po natin with the proponents of the EPS headed by Ma'am Lori po. So trial and error po kami ni Ma'am Glessy Columna kung paano gagamitin ang Google Classroom talaga. Even I used many trials para magawa po iyon. So it's really very hard. So we need really to ready our teachers, our learners, and our parents po in the use of LMS. And that is one thing that you can actually consider in conducting research. Dahil why? Because if the learners are not really into the utilization of an LMS, that is one factor kung bakit hindi matututo ang bata. Why? Because we depend on the LMS. Kung ang bata hindi pa marunong noon, ay maaapektuhan yung pagkatuto. Parang ano lang yan eh. Ang bata na hindi marunong bumasa o walang comprehension, kahit papagbigay mo ng iba't ibang mga subjects, hindi matututo ang bata. Kaya nga di ba sinasabi natin sa ating mga kasamahang guro, ano yung pinaka-root cause o root problem ng isang bata? Yun muna ang bibigyan natin ng solusyon bago ang ibang bagay. Kung ang bata natin hindi marunong na comprehension, kung ang bata natin non-reader, paano mo pa maituturo ang ibang asignatura kung sila nga ay non-reader? Walang comprehension. So yun po yung gusto natin bigyan ng pansin dito. Ano talaga yung kailangan ng bata? Ano talaga yung problema sa paaralan? Yun po yung i-research natin. Kung may LMS kayo, let's try to evaluate the LMS. And let's try to see the efficiency and the effectivity of LMS as a tool in online learning. That is a very good point, a start in research about the LMS. Next po is, syempre, in the delivery of learning sa ngayon, parents really are a big help. Sabi nga nung iba, if you were going to see some of the comments, yung ibang mga magulang, dapat daw sila meron ding 13th month, meron din daw silang bonus. Kasi sila naman daw yung teacher ng kanilang mga anak. So tatawanan na lang natin yung mga ganun. But really, parents really are big help po sa pag-aaral ngayong panahon ito. They are learning facilitators. And from SHO 2018, really the parental involvement is necessary for elementary age students. Kaya nga sa ating mga kasamahan sa elementarya, maaaring mapapansin natin ang mga research na ginagawa ng mga teachers sa elementary, napakadami about reading program. Minsan mapapaisip tayo, sa dami ng mga reading program, lagi naman ang mga result nila, improve, effective. Bakit marami pa rin mga bata sa kanilang mga paaralan or on our respective school na may non-reader pa rin, may frustrated reader pa rin? Maybe because it's not the fault of the program. It's not the program that is a problem. Maybe the process. So kaya nga tayo uma-attend ng mga conferences na katulad nito. We attended different trainings for us to have this direction on how are we really conduct a research in our respective school. Kung halimbawa ako nagkaroon ng research about our reading program, from 50 frustrated readers, naging 20 na lamang sila. Do I need to change the result for the assumption na gusto ko mawawala ang mga frustrated readers namin? Gusto ko lahat sila independent readers namin. That is actually the problem in the process. Kasi minsan, tayong mga guro, we really want our assumption to be the result of the study. If that is the case, what we are doing is really an exercise in futility. Useless na lang yung gagawin natin. Kasi hindi naman talaga natin ginagawa ng tama yung proseso. Kung halimbawa sa 15 na frustrated readers, naging 20 na lamang sila, that's enough. Okay yung research mo. Now let's try to evaluate the reading program. Maybe we can enhance, we can improve some of the mechanisms para kapag ginawa ulit natin yung program na yon sa susunod na set ng mga bata natin, makita natin, tingnan ulit natin. Baka may improvement ulit. A little improvement means a lot to the teachers. A little improvement means a lot to DepEd. Just like what I am always saying to our teachers po. Kapag sa mga programa na ginagawa natin, makaka-reach tayo ng mga 20, 30 mga bata, that's enough. We are making a difference. Because kung marami tayong programa na ginagawa, and we are reaching different learners on that program, pag nag-accumulate yan, cumulative yan, makikita natin, halos lahat, maybe not all, but most of our learners we already reached because of the different interventions and programs we are doing. Now, parents really should be collaborating with the community. Meron tayong programa dati na ginagawa. It's actually from Simeo, and we are actually implementing for some schools. Pero noong time na yun, yung mga alternative delivery mode lamang, the impact, the enhanced instructional management of parents, teachers, and community. This is really a big help now because we really need to collaborate with our parents. And sabi dito with Pattern 2019, parenting and learning at home, volunteering and decision-making, and communicating and collaborating with the community are very important. And it should be demonstrated today because really parents are our learning facilitators. Ngayon, ano ang pwede nating isipan ng mga research topic? How are we going to link the research on the delivery of learning using parents as facilitators? Let's try to check the competencies of our parents as learning facilitator. Kaya napakahalaga ng datos na kinuha natin sa LESF. Yung mga parents na ito yung educational attainment, yung mga parents na ito yung kanilang yung kanilang trabaho. Bakit kaya minsan naisip ba natin na bakit kaya kailangan ng DepEd yun na kailangan malaman natin ano ang educational attainment ng parents? Ano ay yung mga trabaho ng parents? Because that is one point of consideration. Ang parents, halimbawa, undergrad ng elementary. Makakatulong kaya siya ng may kahusayan para maging learning facilitator ng anak? Halimbawa, may parents tayo na hindi marunong bumasa. That's common in public school system. Paano na yung bata? Kaya po mahalaga yung mga datos na yun. We have already the data. What we need is we organize this kind of data for us to come up a result, a meaningful result that will be a basis for your intervention. So yung LESF nyo, kunin nyo yung mga LESF nyo. Tingnan natin yung mga datas na sa mga parents. Let's try to make this data meaningful and beneficial to our school. Then, the problems encountered and coping mechanisms ng mga parents as learning facilitator. At syempre, their level of involvement, the level of participation, and the acceptance of the parents in the program. Syempre, laging merong resistance sa iba yan. Because maybe some of the parents will tell, ay pasensya na kayo, nagtatrabaho ako. Paano ko matutulungan ng aking anak? Merong may isang lumapit sa amin na yung anak niya ay online. Ngayon, gusto niya nang ilipat sa modular yung anak niya. Because sila daw ay nagtatrabaho. Ngayon, ang sabi ko sa teacher, sabihin mo kay mami at daddy, kapag ka ba modular, hindi ba sila magtatrabaho? Di ba nagtatrabaho din sila? So kung meron silang capability of having online, at least they can actually watch the recorded lessons of the teachers pagdating nila sa bahay. Kung ang bata ay hindi pa well-equipped with the use of the technology o ayaw nilang pahawakin ang bata ng computer nang walang mga parents. That's one thing. So pwedeng ganon. So kung tayo mga guro ng paaralan na makikita natin yung the power, the advantage of a certain learning modality and the importance of having parents, we can have that kind of discussion with them. And maybe they will realize, oo nga no, kung modular din naman ang bata, hindi rin naman namin matututukan sa umaga kasi sila naman ay papasok din. At least sa online, they have the technology, they can watch the recorded lessons, they can do the activity. Okay? So yun po yung pwede nating tingnan sa side ng mga parents natin in the delivery of the lesson. Because as again, they really play a vital role in the learning process of our students, especially po sa modular learning. Then ito po yung isa sa pwede nating i-touch, lalo na po sa mga paaralan na may learners with special education needs or yung mga LSENs po natin. Maaari nating simulan ang pagtingin kung ano ba yung mga difficulty na meron po sa mga bata natin. ano po yung mga learning disability na meron po sa mga bata natin. So that we can actually make a program, make an intervention for that student. Sabi natin, malalasap lamang natin yung pagkakapantay-pantay at pantay na oportunidad ng mga bawat bata kung ang bawat klase ng bata na meron tayo sa paaralan ay ating yayakapin. So if we have these learners with special education needs, hindi dapat natin sila ipagsawalang bahala. Kaya po kailangan tingnan natin sila. Lahat ng mga klase ng learners sa ating mga paaralan, kailangan po natin silang yakapin. Kahit sila halimbawa ay dalawa lamang. Dahil sila ay dalawang mag-aaral na kailangan ng pagyakap ng paaralan, kailangan natin silang bigyan ng intervention. So kung meron kayong mga bata sa inyong mga paaralan, this is one area that you can actually do research. You really need to link research to a meaningful experiences, to a meaningful undertaking. Hindi gumawa lang tayo ng research dahil kailangan ito sa IPCRF ng ating sarili. Kailangan ito sa OPCRF ng mga paaralan. Kailangan gagawa tayo ng research kasi ito talaga yung kailangan ng ating paaralan. Ito yung kailangan ng ating mga bata. So pwede tayo mag-develop at mag-validate ng individualized education plan for LSEDs, yung mga IEP natin. And we can have partnership with the SPED center that we have. And we can do really, ano yung appropriate pedagogical practices for LSEDs sa ngayon? Lalo na nga sa ngayon. Napakahirap ng sitwasyon natin ngayon, lalo na sa mga learners with special education needs. So kailangan gumawa ng mga mekanismo ang mga paaralan. Kailangan nating pag-isipan yung inclusion to schools, yung mga level of practices na ginagawa natin, yung mga intervention programs na ginagawa natin. And syempre, yung engagement ng stakeholders natin, yung acceptance nila at yung kanilang awareness. How can our stakeholders be aware of a certain situation of our school if we don't give them information, if we don't give them data? Kaya nga po, hindi lamang naman conference ang pwedeng maging avenue on dissemination of research output. An area or an avenue that we can actually disseminate a research output can be during our state of the school address, during our meeting with the school governing council, during our meeting with the school planning team, if we will going to craft another school improvement plan, or we will going to make adjustment with our SIP. These are the avenues that we can actually use for us to give or to disseminate our research results so that our stakeholders can be engaged, can be aware of what is happening. So we are very fortunate po that though we will not be able to give, be given a fund by DepEd po sa aming mga students with special education needs. We were given a fund from the Cavite PIDAW para po sa reassessment po ng aming mga bata na mga SPED po. So yun po ang ano. So because during that time, hindi po namin natag, year 2019 when I was new principal dito po sa paaralan. So kaya po hindi kami nabigyan ng pondo. But we are very lucky because we have data to support. Ito po yung aming mga bata na merong difficulty at merong learning disability. That's why we were given a support by the local government. So yun po yung pwede natin gawin. We need to make our data meaningful to the eyes of our stakeholders, to the eyes of our learners, because this data, hindi naman yan nakakapagsalita. Pero tayo bilang sa ating mga nasa paaralan, pwede nating tayo maging spokesperson ng ating mga data para maipalaganap sa ating mga stakeholders yung mga resulta noon at makapag-engage sila sa mga programa na ating gagawin. Now, one of the pedagogical practice that we are also considering are the strategies and the innovative learning materials. Sabi nga natin, ang mga guro ng DepEd ay napakamapamaraan. Ang mga guro ng DepEd ay sobrang creative sa pagbibigay ng mga iba't ibang innovative strategies para lang talagang maturuan ang ating mga bata. Now, if you have these strategies and innovative learning materials, you can actually evaluate that. You can actually assess that and share it to others. Ibigay niyo sa amin. Ipalaganap ninyo yung mga best practices. Katulad ng sinasabi natin yung appreciative inquiry, wherein we do research not only because we want to solve a certain problem, we do research because we have best practices that we want to share to others. One example of a best practice na nakita ko po, and we are actually applying this in our school, is the one-stop shop from the school of Dr. Janet Amboy. During a conversation, a real conversation, a friendly conversation, nabanggit niya yun. Sabi ko, maganda nga yun . Maybe we can actually try in our school. And we have this JCBS collection of basic education system, yung parang one-stop shop drive namin. And the School of Tapia had this mechanism also that they are applying in the school. These strategies, these best practices that we can actually get from other schools, we can actually do it in our school. We can actually benchmark that. And there's no problem with that. And try to make an evaluation on that. Whether it suits sa ating context, sa ating context to. Kung may mga reading program na ginagawa ang ibang paaralan, let's try to check. Baka pwedeng ma-benchmark natin. And let's try to evaluate. Baka ito ay suited sa ating mga learners. Kung hindi, maybe we can have some adjustment. Maybe we can have some revisions of the program. Now, if you have best practices in online class with the use of the ICT, with the different educational applications that we have, noong araw si Kahoot, nakikita ko lamang yan pag umattend ako ng mga training. Ginagamit si Kahoot as a priming activity. Ngayon si Kahoot ginagamit niya sa online class. Yung quizzes na nakikita natin sa learning management system, yung quizzes na nakikita natin doon po sa DepEd, yung I forgot the statement. Yung nasa website po ng DepEd na pwede nating ma-download or ma-practice, pwede naman tayong gumawa ng mga quizzes. You just go to quizzes.com and then you can create an interactive quiz like that. So these are the practices that we are doing in an online class that maybe we can actually evaluate and try to share it to others using this kind of conference. So best practices in modular class. Yesterday, during the oral presentation of a research, sabi ko, that's very nice. Just like the call text start log that we are doing in our school, they are actually doing that to validate yung assessment na ginagawa sa bata. Maraming kaparaanan ng mga best practices na mga ginagawa ang mga bawat paaralan that can be shared through this kind of avenue, through this kind of fora, so that others may see the beauty of a practice that you are doing, and maybe they will realize, wow, yun yung aha moment mo na, siguro pwede ko yung gawin sa aming paaralan. Pwede namin itry yan sa aming paaralan. Baka magiging maayos din sa aming paaralan. Just like the supplementary learning materials. Dito, sa nangyari ngayon, it opens possibilities of making different supplementary materials for our learners, suited for our learners. Just like, for example, we have this, no first quarter ng ating school year 2020-2021, siyempre, ang pagsisimula ay isang madugo at marugdob na karanasan. Pero with the help of our LGUs, of our administrators, division, region, and central office, we can actually make some of the interventions on our end. So, gumawa po kami noon ng JC Best Activity Sheets. Yung Just You, Collaborate, Broaden, Evaluate, Supplement. These are activity sheets that we crafted in the first quarter po ng taong panuruan 2020-2021. And with the supplementary learning materials that you have in your school, let's try to evaluate and assess on that. Isang dilema o isang problema na na-encounter talaga ngayon is paano ang mga senior high school na lalo na yung mga course nila ay skill subjects. Just like yung mga electronics, electrical, welding, yung SMAW. Paano kaya ang kaparaanan natin on assessment on their skills? So, maraming mga kaparaanan ang mga ginawa. One area of that is, halimbawa, magkaroon kaya tayo ng TVL on wheels, katulad ng ginawa ng Louis Weifer Junior Senior High School po dito sa Gentry, my former senior high school when I was still a teacher. They have this TVL on wheels. Let's try to evaluate that intervention. Wherein yung mga welding machine, dala-dala ng mga guro at pupunta sa mga bawat bahay to check whether really the students possess the competencies needed for that subject. So maraming mga ganyang mga kaparaanan. Let's try to make a research on that. And let's try to share it with others. Now, ang isang area na talaga namang kailangan nating pagtuunan ng pansin is a practice of giving assessment in distance learning. Paano ang pagbibigay ng assessment, ng authentic assessment sa distance learning? Sabi ni Conrad and Openo 2018, we need to explore assessment that engages really the learners and authentically evaluates education. Katulad ng example natin kanina na TVL on wheels. We can actually engage learners on the spot. We can have really authentically evaluate the learner because we brought the welding machine. The students will demonstrate kung paano magwe-welding. That's one area. Kung halimbawa nagbigay tayo ng summative assessment sa ating mga bata, let's try to check yung mechanism ng call text chart lang o yung call or yung text monitoring para makita natin yung immediate feedback. From Hossein 2021, we really need to create reliable assessment. This is really a challenge to every teacher, to every school in Calabarzon and in DepEd. How are we going to create reliable assessment with the learning modalities, with the kind of pedagogical practices that we are applying today? Let's try to evaluate on that. Let's try to research on that and see whether it is applicable sa ating social context, whether it's applicable sa kind of learners that we have. Because we really need to safeguard the academic integrity of the learning modalities that we are applying. Sasabihin ng iba na maraming mga parents ang nagkaroon ng honors ngayon. Di ba? Minsan nakakalungkot yun. So sometimes it's a memes or a joke. That is why we need really to safeguard the academic integrity of the mechanisms that we have. As much as possible, let's try to make mechanisms on how we will going to give assessment, how we will going to validate assessment in modular and online. So let's try to research on that. So we can have assessment sa mechanism ng mga modular and online natin. Yung immediate feedbacking natin. We can have contextualized individual learners progress report form. So these are the areas in the practices that we are doing in giving assessment that we really need to dig deeper. Gawan natin ng masusing pag-aaral. Yung portfolio assessment. How are we going to really have a reliable portfolio assessment for our learners? Let's try to think of mechanisms on that. Let's try to research on that. And yung mga assessment tools na ginagawa natin for online and modular. Kasi sinasabi natin na these are new to us. Maybe for some it's not. Sa iba may distance learning naman. Nung gusto kong mag-aral noon sa UP, nag-enroll po ako ng distance learning sa UP OU. Gusto ko kasing magkasablay pero sumablay. Hindi ko pala kaya yung online class. Yung talagang online class all throughout. Ayun, tinrap ko lahat ng subjects. So, sumablay ako para magkasablay. But it's okay with me. So ngayon, sa DepEd, ngayon sa ating mga paaralan, eto na yung sitwasyon natin ngayon. Ano yung mga assessment tools na pwede nating gamitin para sa online and modular? Kailangan ito na evaluate natin. Back up dapat ito ng datos. It should be backed up by research. So that is a challenge for every teacher researcher in Calabarzon. Let's try to think of some mechanisms on how we can really engage our learners and authentically evaluate the education that we have with the different modalities that we are implementing in our school. Now, lalabas ang iba't ibang reading intervention in the delivery of learning to our students with the different learning modalities. Let's say, for example, reading program. Kahit pa sabihin natin, ang dami na nating reading program, that is one challenge for us. Why? Because, sabi nga natin, in reality nga, ang hirap na natin, it's really a challenge for a teacher na ang lahat ng bata natin sa paaralan during face-to-face ay makapagbasa ng may kahusayan. Ngayon pa kayang pandemya. Ngayon pa kayang ang bata ay wala sa ating paaralan. Kaya kailangan tayong gumawa ng mga kaparaanan para sa implementation ng mga intervention programs natin. Just like a reading program. Now, we really need to measure yung extent ng implementation. Yung mga problemang na-encounter ng mga teacher in the implementation of the program. Yung mga mekanismo na ina-apply natin sa ating reading program. Kunwari, meron kayo halimbawa na isang estratehiya, katulad ngayong reading month po, we have this what we call yung umagang pagbasa, wherein every 9 a.m., every Monday, we have teachers, supervisors, and we will engage stakeholders to have this umagang pagbasa po sa mga bata through FB Live. And let's try to evaluate. So pag napanood ng bata, let's give some assessments. Pag napanood ng bata, let's try to ask them randomly, ano yung natutuhan nila doon sa kwento. So tayo sa mga paaralan, let's try to make different mechanisms on how are we going to implement a certain program. Let's try to think strategically, wherein we will going to identify the possible problems that we will going to encounter and ano na yung solution natin doon. Para once we encounter that problem, during the implementation, we have already the solution. And syempre ngayon maraming mga mental health initiatives na mga ini-apply ngayon. Sa amin po, meron kaming mental health check chart for learners and for teachers. Ito po yung na-share namin sa isang avenue po last year po sa DepEd Central, yung about sa mga mental health initiatives. At ginawan po namin ito ng yung resulta po ng aming mental health check chart for learners ay ginamit namin para sa aming intervention. Yung utilization po ng call text chart lab namin, a guidance counseling program. So this is actually, we have already the assessment of this program and it's our second year of implementation. Ano ba yung mga emerging themes ng mental health status ng learners? And those identified learners that we have will be part of our call text chart lab. And these students will be part of our intervention. Kaya nga sabi ko, kung dito sa mental health check chart natin, we have 32 students identified in the result of our mental health check chart that we gave interventions, that is enough. Okay yun. Then we try to take another intervention and we reach another number of teachers. So ito po ay aming second year na ginagawa ngayon. Let's try to think other intervention programs that we can actually apply in our school. And once you have the data of the result of your research, ano yung susunod? Kasi katulad halimbawa noong 5-piece model ni Sir Ivan Brian Indoctivo. Dapat hindi tayo matatapos sa unang P, which is propose. And sometimes, statistically acceptable na in 100 teachers who were given a chance of attending a research, maybe 30% will make a research proposal. And from that 30%, baka yung 10% ng 30% will be able to produce the research, yung second P natin. Ngayon, maaaring sila ay makapag-present ng ating paper. Pangatlong is yun. Minsan, yung pang-apat na 4P, which is the publish, hindi ito minsan na nagagawa. Why? Because mahirap. Kaya, pumupunta na tayo sa pang-5, which is very important, the practice. Kaya nga, di ba, ang ating mga guro, we always engage or encourage our teachers to make an action research. Because we really need to evaluate the utilization, the implementation, or the practices that we are doing, the strategies, the methods, the pedagogical practices that we are doing in our respective school. We really need to evaluate that. Kaya nga dapat hindi mawawala yung pang-5 P. Yung pang-4 na P na publish, this is very hard. At ngayon po, naglabasan ang maraming mga publications na ang iba doon magbabayad ka ng libo-libo. I have nothing against with that kasi kung halimbawa ikaw guro, may pambayad ka, you can do it. But if you want to publish your paper, may mga publication po na libre. Katulad ng R2A Journal, libre yan. Hindi naman naningil ang regional office natin para ma-publish yung papers natin. And there are universities dito sa Pilipinas that they have journals that you can actually send your paper na hindi ka magbabayad. You just try to look yung Philippine e-journals and you will see different journals in every area. For example, education, and you can actually send research on that. If you attended a research conferences, maybe here in the Philippines or abroad, they have this kind of parang reward for some papers that they will going to choose for their publication. When we attended the conference in Thailand way back 2016, our paper with Dr. Gina Dulce and Ma'am Mean Gatpandan were included in the ASEAN Journal of Education. We did not pay for that. So let's try to look for some publications na hindi kayo magbabayad. Kasi in reality, a published paper ay hindi dapat binabayaran. Okay? So yun po yun. But if there are some publications that they asking money and you have the money to pay, it's your own volition to take. Okay? So let's try to think of, let's try to remember yung 5 P's na binanggit ko, na dapat yung pang-5 P na practice ay hindi mawawala. Maaaring mawala si publish. Maaaring hindi mo na-present yung paper mo. And that's okay. Pero dapat yung practice, yung pang-5 P, hindi dapat po mawawala. Kasi yun po yung pinaka-meat. Yun po yung pinaka-heart of educational research in DepEd. The evaluation of the utilization of a learning materials, the evaluation on the implementation of the different strategies, or the evaluation on the implementation of the different PPAs that you have in school, in the division, or even in region. So dapat po yung pang-5 P, which is the practice, ay hindi po mawawala. And with that po, as a teacher researcher, let us always continue seeking for solutions and sharing your best practices for all be the best learners of our school. Kasi dito, katulad sa amin sa JCBES at sa atin po sa Calabarzon, tayo ay naniniwala na ang bawat bata ay bida at ang bawat bata ay the best sa bawat puso ng gurong Calabarzon. Thank you very much po. Muli po, Mark Aaron P. Crayus, isang guro, isang mananaliksik mula sa Juliano C. Brosas Elementary School, Division of General Trias City.
Thank you so much, Sir Mark Aaron, for generously sharing your knowledge and experience in your presentation on linking research with our pedagogical practices. And siguro yung what lingers to me more from your presentation, sir, is how to safeguard the academic integrity of the Philippine education. And I can't agree more that it takes so little to do much, and I hope this will inspire us as education advocates, the teachers and school leaders to be more creative and innovative in delivering quality education to all Filipino children. So thank you, Sir Mark Aaron, for a fruitful discussion with you. And we have a 5-minute open forum for all the participants. You may chat or you may send your questions, clarifications, or word of appreciation to our presenter using our chat box. Let me read. And from Ma'am Catherine Gonzaga, thank you for your comprehensive presentation, sir. From Sir Daryl Guerra, thanks so much for Sir Aaron. There are a lot of words of appreciation. Do we have any questions po for Sir Aaron? Maybe I can give you like 30 seconds thinking time for you to compose your questions. Ayan. From Ma'am Arnie Corrita Salud, thank you so much po. I learned a lot from the topic or issues to study to the implementation po. Ayan. Way to go, Sir Mark. Ang dami ko pong learning. Salamat po. From Ma'am Lisa Tixon.
Marami pong salamat. Sabi nga natin, ang pagkatuto talaga ng mga bata makikita natin sa kanilang mga bahay. Pero ang pagkatuto ng bawat guro, kailangan nating lumabas sa ating comfort zone. Dapat lumabas tayo sa classroom natin. Tingnan natin ang mga bawat paligid natin sa ating mga paaralan. And you will see, ang dami palang mga bagay na kailangan pa nating matutuhan at bigyan ng atensyon.
And then, it's really true. From Ma'am Cincy Mary, thank you, sir. I am more inspired now to conduct research. Indeed, an eye-opener ang talk ni Sir Mark. Ayan. Here we have a question from Ma'am Marites Lalobo. Thank you, sir. I want to grab the opportunity of asking this question. What particular help could be extended whenever we found out that parents can't help and teach their children based on their educational status?
Thank you very much, Ma'am Marites, si Ma'am Marites yun, for that question.
Yes.
Ang isa po sa kaparaanan na pwede po natin gawin, halimbawa po, merong isang magulang na talagang hindi niya kayang maturuan ng anak niya. Noong pong enrollment, di ba kumuha po tayo ng mga datos ng mga addresses ng mga bata. Ngayon, ang ginawa po namin sa sectioning namin ay yung magkakabarangay o magkakapurok ay magkakasama. Now, if we found out na merong isang parent na hindi talaga niya kaya, we will going to look on our data. Sino yung parent na malapit doon that may be of help to that parent? Kaya kailangan talaga i-engage natin ngayon talaga ang lahat ng stakeholders sa ating mga paaralan. Kung hindi naman pwede si parent, baka maaaring iyon ang bata na ilalagay natin sa ating isang programa. Maaaring yung home visitation program natin. Or maaari namang meron tayong programa na involve ang local government officials natin, yung ating barangay, maaaring yon ang itatap natin. Kasi yun yung may kailangan. Katulad ng binabanggit ko sa aking mga kasamahang guro, nag-home visitation tayo. Make sure yung hino-home visit ninyo, hindi na yun yung bata na talagang bibigyan ng atensyon. Sabi ko nga, iba't ibang programa na ginagawa ninyo, dapat iba't ibang klaseng learners ang ating nire-reach. Kung yung bata ay mahusay na, okay na siya, independent, hindi mo siya dapat i-home visit just because malapit siya sa ating paaralan. So yun po yun. So they can actually check sa kanilang data sino yung parent na maaaring makatulong o kaya naman sa local government natin, sa barangay. Or even the teachers itself, himself or herself.
Thank you, Sir Mark. And we have another question, and I think this will be the last question since we have limited time. From Sir Neil Tirona. Sir, congratulations po. Sir, tanong ko lang po yung assessment on wheels po para sa TLE, particularly sa SMAU. Paano po kaya ang mechanism for formative part of developing the skills?
Sir Neil Tirona, so masasagot ko ito sa pamamaraan na maaaring ina-apply nila kasi I'm not from the senior high school. Pero yung sa formative assessment po kasi nila ay naka-modular po ang mga bata. Now, yung pong assessment na ginagawa nila sa TBL on Wheels, yun na po yung pinaka-summative assessment, yung performance task nila. Sir Neil.
Yeah. Thank you, Sir Mark, for a comprehensive answer. And I just want to read the words of appreciation from our participants, particularly from Ma'am Edna Sagara. Thank you so much, Sir Aaron. I learned a lot, especially on how to find and create problem for research. It really gives us insight on how to address the right problem for our pupils' development. And from Ma'am Michelle Banca, I don't have any questions po, but I just want to say that teachers should always put the learners at the limelight of the quality learning. Thumbs up po tayo dyan. And lastly, from Ma'am Daisy, thank you so much, sir. I learned a lot po. Napakaraming pwedeng gawin po ng research quest. Actually, there is a question. Can we publish the same research paper on different journal or publication sites? Maybe you can answer that quickly.
Ma'am Daisy, that is a no-no. A research paper na na-publish na po cannot be published in another research journal. Kaya po, mapapansin natin, there was once a situation wherein maaaring may dalawang paper na na-publish sa iba, sino ang original. Baka maaaring mangyari yun, ha? Halimbawa po, ako may paper, na-publish na ito. Tapos meron ako nung sinearch ko yung paper na yon, na-publish din sa iba. Tapos maaaring nabago yung name. So, tingnan po natin yon. Kasi a research paper, once published, hindi na po siya maaaring i-publish sa iba. Kaya yung iba pong mga nagtatanong, di ba, alam mo, magsasend tayo ng research paper natin. Tinatanong nila tayo, na-publish na po ba ito? Kasi kung na-publish na, hindi mo na maaaring ngayong i-submit. Isang beses lamang po. Thank you very much po.
Thank you, Sir Aaron. And to award the Certificate of Recognition, we have our Chief Education Supervisor from PPRD, Ma'am Vier.
Yes, congratulations. Maraming salamat, Sir Mark Aaron Creus. Dr. Mark Aaron Creus. Ayan, kakagraduate lang kasi ni Sir Mark Aaron. Okay, so allow me to read again the citation of this certificate. Republic of the Philippines, Department of Education, Region 4A, Calabarzon, Gate 2, Karangalan Village, Cainta, Rizal. Certificate of recognition is awarded to Mark Aaron P. Creus for sharing his valuable insights and competence as plenary speaker during the 2021 virtual conference of Basic Education Researchers, or VISIBER, with the theme Remaining Relevant Education Research and Innovation Practices in DepEd Region 4A towards the realization of One Region, 22 Solutions, conducted by the Department of Education, Region 4A, Calabarzon, held on November 23 to 25, given this 24th day of November 2021 through virtual conference via Zoom. Signed, Francis Cesar B. Bringas, Regional Director. Thank you very much, Dr. Mark Aaron Creus.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Vier, and thank you once again, Sir Mark Aaron. I've learned a lot from your presentation, and once again, congratulations.